Hello, I am Horrorama, and today I have found 4 intriguing stories and experiences that multiple people have posted on various subreddits. But before we begin, I did want to ask you that if you end up enjoying my narrations, then please do consider liking and subscribing, as that really does help the channel a lot. And also, if you have any kind of experience or story that you would like to share and have it be narrated on this channel, then check out the subreddit in the description below. But either way, without any further ado, let's get into the narrations. The first story is imposed by user Clyde2003. This story happened just this summer. I'm only now getting around to writing it down. I would consider myself an outdoorsman. I grew up in the sticks. I've spent a lot of my life wandering in and enjoying the backcountry. I'm older now and have settled down in the suburbs. Wife, 2 boys, and a house, a dog, a desk job, the whole suburban thing. I want opportunities for my kids that come from suburban life, but I also want them to grow up with an appreciation for the outdoors. So when my oldest son was big enough for his first solo father-son camping trip, I was excited. My wife and younger son stayed home for this midsummer trip. It was going to be a great bonding experience for me and my son. Because my son is just 5, I didn't want to do anything too extreme on our first camping trip. We needed a place that wasn't too deep into the Colorado Front Range, but still allowed for dispersed camping. I don't consider camping in RV parks or established campgrounds to be actual camping. You might as well be at a motel watching TV. Camping, at most, is a tent, sleeping bag, and a fire. A dispersed camping area called Gordon Gulch, west of Boulder, caught my attention. I had never been to this area before. There were no facilities, and it was dispersed enough you couldn't see or hear other campers nearby. My son and I had a blast all day. We set up camp, collected firewood, went for a hike, saw a moose and a bobcat, tried a little fishing, and finally, as the sunlight faded, we returned to our campsite to light a fire. We had a traditional and nutritious camping meal of fire-burnt hot dogs and marshmallows. It was a good day, definitely a core memory for both my son and me. The perfect first camping experience for a preschooler, or at least so I thought. After all that fun, my son and I were exhausted. It was time for bed. The sound of an evening summer breeze through the pines is better than any commercial sleep aid. I don't even remember drifting off. It was a hard, dreamless sleep that only physical exertion can bring. One thing about my son, he inherited many things from me: hair color, eye shape, disposition, and my unusually wide feet. But one particular thing he got from his mother was sleep talking. It's not unusual to hear him having full conversations in his sleep. It gets more pronounced when he's overly tired. I was catapulted out of the void of sleep. Not sure what aroused me, I sat up, collecting myself. The world seemed to be at peace. It was quiet, just me and the breeze through the treetops. I couldn't figure out what woke me so suddenly. The sound of my son laughing in his sleep cut through my groggy confusion. It was a deep belly laugh. Must be a fun dream, I thought hazily. Gently rocking him was enough to quiet him down. That must have been what startled me, I determined. As I repositioned to fall back to sleep, my son burst out laughing. I just sighed and closed my eyes. He'll quiet down soon enough, I thought. But he laughed again. This time his laugh was echoed by something outside our tent. I held my breath and listened, unsure of what I just heard. It wasn't an echo. There was something out there, and it was laughing in unison with my son. My grogginess vanished as the adrenaline began to pump. It couldn't be real. It had to be in my imagination. I sat up in my sleeping bag, listening to the night. Hearing nothing after a minute, my muscles relaxed. I started to settle back down. I must have just been hearing things. I was tired after all. Checking the time, I saw it was 4 in the morning. The sun would be up in a couple of hours. My son laughed again, and again it was answered with laughter outside. I was now absolutely certain it was not an echo. As I tried to make sense of what was happening, the voice outside called out my son's name. My blood ran cold. That voice, it was so familiar. Then it clicked in my brain. It was the voice of my younger son. That wasn't possible. He was safe at home with my wife, miles and miles away. I could hear twigs crunching beyond our thin tent walls. It was impossible to tell the distance from us, but there was something out there, circling us. Unprompted this time, it called out my son's name in that little toddler voice. My 5-year-old son, still fast asleep, called out to his brother, asking him to play. The thing outside the tent laughed and urged my son to come outside. That thing with my little son's voice sounded cold, hollow, and dead. The floodgates of my adrenaline burst open. Cold sweat formed on my face. I was frightened out of my mind. But my primal caveman brain roared to life. I was in Papa Bear mode. Nothing was going to take or hurt my son. I was putting a stop to this. Whatever it was out there, I didn't care. You don't mess with my kids. Say what you will, but when you're camping miles from anything, it's not worth the risk of being unarmed. Wild animals, wild people, you just have to be prepared. I almost always take a firearm with me when I'm camping. Pepper spray and bear bells are great, but nothing gets attention from a conscious threat faster than the sound of chambering around. I spoke loudly into the night that I had a gun and was coming out. I hoped the fear in my voice was masked by my aggressiveness. The only reply was the breeze through the treetops. My son was still asleep. He's definitely a hard sleeper, another trait from his mom. My wife and I have joked that he could sleep through a tornado. Stepping out into the cool summer night, a gun in one hand and a flashlight in the other, I surveyed the campsite. The fire was down to embers. Our fishing gear was leaning against the pickup. The firewood was still neatly stacked. Nothing seemed out of place. Not wanting to stray far from my tent or my sleeping son, I sat down outside the entrance. I waited in the dark with the flashlight off. Not far into the trees, I heard a branch break. Then another snapped, this time closer. I stood up and flashed my light in the direction of the sound, but nothing was there. The voice called out, this time from behind, and this time focused towards me. It was my youngest son's voice again, crying out for me from the dark forest. I threw the light beam in that direction. A pair of shimmering green eyes were illuminated by my flashlight. They were only 2 or so feet above the ground, the same height as a toddler. I took a small step towards it. I wanted to get a better look at it. I needed to see more. The eyes, unblinking, remained in place. Getting closer didn't help reveal this thing. It seemed to absorb the light from my flashlight, almost devouring it. I couldn't make out its size, shape, or color. It seemed to swallow up all the light around it, save for its 2 shimmering green eyes. That thing laughed in its hollow toddler's voice, this time with malice and cruelty in it. The eyes never looked away from me, never blinking, focused only on me, like a predator before the pounce. Not wanting to give up any ground to a predator, I stepped forward again. It didn't move. Not knowing what to do, I screamed as loud as I could. I waved my arms, trying futilely to shoo it away. The eyes shimmered, and as I stared back, the eyes shifted from green to amber. I watched as they began to rise up into the air. It was now apparent to me this thing had been crouching and was now standing up. I could only watch in silent terror as the eyes finally stopped rising, nearly 10 feet off the ground. The night air erupted with a deep growl. I could feel the vibrations in my guts. I couldn't see a mouth, but I could hear teeth snapping and gnashing. My son in the tent behind me began to scream. That was the only time the eyes lost focus on me and shifted towards the screams of my kid. My only reaction was to fire my gun into the air. The eyes immediately vanished. My ears were ringing, but I could hear the growls turn to shrieks, followed by a cacophony of crashing branches and undergrowth. I stood there until I couldn't hear the shrieking anymore. It trailed off deep into the trees. I was left with only the sound of the breeze in the treetops and the quiet sobbing of my child. Twilight was beginning to illuminate the forest. Shaking and exhausted, I sat down in the dirt in front of the tent. I tried to collect myself. My 5-year-old shouted out to me. That got me out of my daze. I picked myself up and went into the tent to retrieve him. Putting him in the truck, I locked the doors and wasted little time breaking down camp. We were out of that camp and back on the road by the time the sun broke over the horizon. I have no idea what is in those woods. I do plan to camp in that area again, albeit without my family, and definitely with some friends. I want to find out more about this thing. Thankfully, my son doesn't seem fazed by anything that happened that night. He thinks I was chasing a bear away from camp. And maybe he's right. I hope so anyways. My son can't wait to go on another camping trip. But truthfully, I'm thinking the next family camping trip might be at an RV park, or even a motel. That still counts as family camping, right? The next story is posed by user DocsTombed24. Circling around Mesa Community College Red Mountain campus, there's a nice little trail to follow. The area is a Sonoran Desert Nature Preserve, and it's a nice walk to see the sunrise and watch all the animals coming and going. The trail curves near the intersection between McKellips Road and Power Road, and there is a little grove of cacti. I have walked past it many times, and often felt a little colder there, and maybe a little uneasy, but I always chalked it up to being shadier and wetter, since the runoff from monsoon seasons probably drained there. I'm not the only one who has felt it. My father-in-law walked the same trail a few weeks ago. I had never mentioned that feeling to him, but he confirmed that this particular stretch of trail had also made him feel off. I walked the same trail today and was warming up for a run. This was around 7:45 a.m. I happened to be wearing my Polar Beat heart rate monitor that I use to track my heart rate, and at the time, I was also listening to a podcast on my headphones. I was having a nice morning, felt no particular stress short of the usual, and was feeling overall fine. As I rounded the trail near the intersection, I suddenly had a huge shift in my physiology. I have never had a panic attack before. I like to think I'm pretty level-headed. I've been an EMT and have pretty good handle on my emotions. This was like nothing I've ever felt before. In the same instant that the podcast I was listening to stopped without me pausing it, my heart started pounding in my chest so hard and so suddenly that I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Together with this was a slight sense of nausea. I felt pressure weighing down on my head and chest, and everything felt so much heavier and darker, and it seemed like my legs didn't want to walk as well. I also thought I heard whispering, but it was like it was in the distance, barely perceptible. Everything felt like it was vibrating. My vision changed a little too. It felt like the world was twisted just slightly differently in that spot. I kept walking, and the feeling followed for a while, but eventually subsided. Another odd detail was I noticed a bunch of trash piled up in the middle of the trail, which looked like it was done by people, though I'm not sure if that is significant at all. This is the first time I have ever had any kind of experience I would even remotely associate with the paranormal. I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts on what may have happened. I know there are plenty of stories of the strange things that happen out in the desert, and I'm curious if anyone has ever heard of something similar. Whatever it was seems to have been a permanent residence out by those trees. The next story is imposed by user Pangolin Wanted 123. 4 experiences from my youth. Pranked? I was completely home alone one evening. I turned off the TV in my bedroom. It was a 90s style box TV. Anyways, I go to shower, and when I got out of the shower, the TV wouldn't turn back on. Did the power go off, I thought? No. The lights are still on, so clearly there's power. Maybe the power cord got loose. I checked behind the TV. It wasn't just the power cord. It was also the cord to my VCR and cable box. All 3 cables had been disconnected. All 3 of them. Did someone come home and try to play a prank on me? No. A quick tour of the house confirmed I was home alone. And how would they have known I was watching TV before I showered? Had someone broken in and tried to steal my TV? Well, I doubt it. I hadn't noticed anything just moments ago. Plus, why would they want my ratty old TV when there was nicer stuff in the home, including a nicer TV in the living room? Another quick tour of the house, this time looking under the beds and in the closets. I even went into my parents' bathroom and peeked in the shower, but nothing. There was no one. Back in my room, I plugged all the cables back in, and with as much courage and calmness as I could muster, I said something like, "Okay, you got me. I didn't think it was funny. Please don't do that again." I went about my evening until my parents and siblings came back home. Disembodied voices. It was about 2 a.m., and I just hung up the phone with my girlfriend. I heard what I thought was muffled voices over white noise. Maybe a TV was on? My sibling, a room over, was scared of the dark and would usually put the TV on a sleep setting. I thought maybe they forgot to do that. When I opened the bedroom door, the voices sounded lower, but the white noise was louder, and as if it were coming from the direction of my sibling's bedroom. I made my way to the bedroom, but when I put my ear up to the door, the noise now sounded like it was coming from the living room, at the front of the house. Maybe this was some sort of nighttime Doppler effect thing. I made my way to the living room, down this T-shaped hallway, and the noise gets louder. But as soon as I come to the front of the house that opens up to the living room, nothing. Just silence. The noise is completely gone. Did the dark just play a trick on me? I felt hands gently shake me awake, right at my shoulders and chest. When I opened my eyes, I saw a figure in the shape of a man, but darker than the surrounding darkness of my room, kneeling at my bedside. The second I saw it, I knew it wasn't a man, but I'm not sure how to really explain how I knew that, and that it didn't want to harm me, just wake me up for some reason. A second later, it stood up and took a step back and completely vanished. I sat up and looked around. Something startled me awake, and when it did, I was wide awake and terrified. Suddenly I heard what sounded like a plastic bag being ruffled at the doorway to my bedroom. I couldn't explain why that noise was so scary, but I was basically terrified. When the noise moved from the door to the center of my bedroom, to the foot of my bed, to right next to my bed, I was panicking. I was frozen in fear. The only thing I could move were my eyes. Suddenly the noise was gone, but I felt something climb on top of me. Like there was this pressure on my hips and on my chest. That's when I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to make myself sit up, but I failed. I couldn't move. I then felt this odd, wispy presence hover right above my mouth, almost like feathers, and then it was gone. To date, these have been the only paranormal experiences I have ever encountered. Some of these can be explained by phenomena such as sleep paralysis, but others I'm not really sure about. The next story is posted by user Danky Bangs. I want to start off by saying I don't believe in anything paranormal or supernatural. I'm definitely a man of science and believe everything can be explained by science. But with that being said, I still don't understand what I saw. I live in Lubbock, Texas, and next to my town there's another smaller town about 20 minutes out called Wilson. Me and my three friends were just hanging out one cold night and saw it was getting late, about 3-ish in the morning. My friend lived in Wilson at the time, so we decided to drop him off first thing to get the long drive out of the way. After we dropped him off, we got back onto the highway heading back into our town. As soon as we got on the interstate, we entered some mist. We had driven this trip plenty of times before, but this time we noticed something different standing right on the grassy median. The figure of a person dressed in an all-white gown with long, straight black hair was facing away from us. I was driving and decided to slow down to get a better look. The second we got close to the figure, it turned its head like an owl to reveal the pale face of a woman screaming at us, then jumped in front of the car and flew up using these giant white wings. It wasn't a gown at all. It was these strange, bird-like wings covering her entire body. I don't know if it was just me, but I could feel her eyes burning a hole in mine. The image of this giant bird woman, or whatever it was, still haunts me to this day. At the time, we were at a loss for words. We didn't understand what had just happened. In the matter of a few seconds, we witnessed some unexplainable creature, and just as fast as it happened, it was gone. The paranormal, mythology, folklore, and anything of that nature is a truly interesting topic. Even as an adamant skeptic, anyone can enjoy such tales, either through their unique horror and mystique, or simply through their fascinating connections to undoubtedly real events and people. But either way, I do hope you enjoyed my narrations. But even if you didn't, I want to wish you a good rest of your day.